Well, welcome. Thanks for having me on well, actually almost my own conference. Um, First of all, a little bit about me. My name is Barel. I've been working doing Oracle, well, Oracle SQL since '97. I started playing with Oracle PL SQL in '99, and that's what I've been doing ever since. Um, I've been doing a little bit of Apex in the early 2000s, and actually starting to do a bit of it lately, but I'm not really good at that. Um, um, I've become an Oracle Ace in 2011. In 2019, I was promoted to Oracle Ace Director, and that's mainly because I talk a lot on different conferences. And last year it's been mostly from home, but normally I'll fly out to all places in the world. I also write plugins for PL SQL Developer, which you can see here. That's my tool of choice. I think it's better than Toad or SQL Developer or what have you. But that's mainly because I've been using that for the last 20 plus years. I've also written a couple of articles. Sometimes I blog on either my own blog or the Qualogy blog. I've written some articles on All Things Oracle, but allthingsoracle.com doesn't exist anymore. But you can find my articles on this site, the Redgate site. I had my own column in the OTech magazine, but the OTech magazine doesn't exist anymore. So I put the columns on my own website. So if you have a publication you want to get rid of, ask me to write for you. Chances are within a couple of months, it'll be gone. These are my contact details. Yeah, I'll make sure the slides will become available in the PDF, so you have my contact details there. As I said, I'm an Oracle Ace. Been that for the last 10 years or so. If you want to know more about the ACE program, go to the bit.ly link over here, Oracle ACE program. And if you, well, it says here, if you want to nominate yourself, but I wouldn't do that. I would ask someone to nominate you, or if you want to nominate someone you know, go to acenomination.oracle.com and you'll find all the information you will need. I don't think this is too much new free tier, but it's the best slide I have. Oracle offers the free tier on the cloud, where you have 2 Oracle autonomous databases. And if you have the correct region for your free tier, then you'll even have the Oracle 21C available, but at least it's 19C available. And you can do just about anything there. All you have to do is log in every week or so, and otherwise your database will be shut down, so you have to restart it. And if you're not logging in after 3 months or so, it'll be reclaimed. So, but we can create scripts for that, just logging in and keep that alive. So, topic of this afternoon or this morning, wherever you are, get to know your code by instrumentation. We all write loads and loads of code, and we all forget about logging. But if there's no logging available, you don't know what your program is doing. It's not a matter of if something will go wrong, it's a matter of when it will go wrong. And when it does, you don't know what has happened in the steps before your failure. So what do you do while developing? You'll put in some database logging. And no, DBMS output is not logging. database logging is not available by default, at least not for PL SQL code. If you do something like using DBMS output, you can create something like this. Create a program and put in all these DBMS output.put line, start of my program, do something is important, do a lot of work, another line, when you're done doing the important stuff, do some more work, etc. And when you run that, you'll see nothing. And why is that? Because output is off by default. So you have to set server output on, size unlimited, and you run your program again. And then you have your output. But it's just your output on your machine, in your session, only you can see that. If my colleague is running my program, he or she will see the output if the output is turned on, but I can never see that. So what you want to do, you want to create some form of logging, build your own form of logging. Let's see, let's create a table and just call it tlog. It has an ID. The ID is generated always as identity, so it gets an incrementing number automatically. You don't need to have a sequence or a trigger for that. Then there's the info. That's what we put in the DBMS output line, and the timestamp, default, the current timestamp. So when I then, instead of writing DBMS output line, start of my program, I now insert into the tlog table, values, etc. If I then run the program, you'll see the table gets filled up. So I can do some settings to format my output. And if I then query the log table, it'll show exactly what happened. Start of my program, do something important, do something even more important, etc. And then after your test is done, you do a rollback, and you think, well, what was the output of my code? Let's query the log table again, and there are no rows selected. And why is that? Because you roll back. Next step, this is a lot of work, writing all the insert into statements. I have to know the table name. I have to know the name of the column. So I want to write a procedure to do this for me. That way I can just call log this, put in the log text, and have that insert, do the insert into the table for me. My code gets a lot smaller because I'm just calling the procedure. Don't have to do the insert into table anymore. But the output is pretty much the same. I execute my program, the table gets filled up, I select the data is there, I do a rollback, and the data is gone again. So apart from having less typing to do, it doesn't really help me that much. But maybe you've seen it already in the, I've left some spaces in the program. If I create this procedure as an autonomous transaction by adding the pragma autonomous transaction, and after the insert I do a commit, then only this insert gets committed. Whatever happens in the program, for instance, in my program, so in the calling program, that doesn't get committed. Only this insert into tlog, that is the one that gets committed. And you'll have to do an exception. And in your exception, if something goes wrong, you want to roll back. not much can go wrong in this case, but just to make sure, if you do an autonomous transaction, either you commit or roll back. Otherwise, you'll get an Oracle error, dangling transaction or something. Don't know the exact number. So if I then execute my program and I query the table, the data is there, not much change there. If I then do a rollback, because I don't want anything to have happened to the database, and if I after that rollback I again query the table, the data is still there. That's what the autonomous transaction does for you. Any questions so far? Jelle, can you help? No open questions?
No, at the moment are there no open questions, Patrick.
Okay,
no. Please
thanks.
continue.
Thank you. Okay, so database logging is the way to go, but you don't want to build your own. Chances are you're never going to be as good as the combined minds of an open source project. So what I did was use open source, but with some adaptations, and I'll come back to the adaptations later. So if you want to implement logging, what you do actually is in the logging gets implemented in your development code, which gives you a lot of lines in your logging table. But then actually you want to take it out before you go to testing. But hey, you don't want to take the logging out, because at testing you find all the strange things that works in your code. So you want to keep it there. So in testing, there's still going to be logging lines in your code, but then you don't want to run this in, maybe not in acceptance, especially not in production, because you don't want your production database to be filled with all kinds of debug messages. But if you take it out from your code, you just test it, then actually you haven't, your deploying code, you haven't tested, even if it's less than what you've had before. If you take out lines from a tested package, it becomes an untested package. But in production, you don't want the extra lines. So how do you do that? Well, let's see. In production, you want the cleanest code as possible. No overhead whatsoever. But if something goes wrong, you want to have the overhead there. So what do you do if something goes wrong? Well, we'll just deploy a new package. I think that is a no-go. We never, well, actually, no, we'll never have the opportunity to deploy new code when something went wrong. Something went wrong. Oh, I'll just deploy some new code and do it again. No way there's gonna anybody's gonna say yes to that. But what you can do is you build in a switch in your code. At normal runtime, the switch is set to off. So the debug messages, the log messages, will never be sent to the database. If something goes wrong, you just flip the switch and everything gets logged. All the steps that are being taken will get logged into the database. And how do you do that? Well, I use the logger framework with some adaptations. Why the logger framework? Well, it has a couple of advantages. It installs in a separate schema. I'm using it on the free tiers I'm I've installed now. So I've just installed a logger schema, installed the logger packages there. I granted access. You can grant the access to individual users or to public. I would say always grant access to public because everybody should be using this. And the logger framework already has cleanup jobs installed. So if logger lines are older than, let's say, 5 or 10 days, and the severity is just the debug or the information, more on that later, they get cleaned up from your table. And you can even have some preferences which have an expiry date, and those preferences will get cleaned up also automatically. So how does this work? Well, Logger has a couple of different log levels. There's the debug level. Debug level gives you all the detailed information you want to have. You can put in, well, you could put in a debug line every other line of code, telling it what it has been doing. If you're a bit like me, if you do your documentation in your code, instead of putting the comments in your code, put a debug line in your code, so you can see what has been happening, what your program is doing. The level above that is the information level. I'm especially using that for program flow. I'm using the information level when I'm entering a procedure, when I'm exiting a procedure, so I can also always see what has the program been doing, which program has been calling which one, etc. Above that, there's the warning level. All the non-critical errors. If a user tries to put in a parker instead of a number into a field, that's not a critical error. You can fix that. You can catch that. But you'll want to issue a warning saying, hey, this user has been doing this a lot and lots of times. And above that, there's the error level. All the critical errors, take it in your, when others, always log an error. And in the error, you can log all the information you need, all the variable values, the call stack, etc., whatever you want. Then there's the threshold. The threshold states which pieces of logging lines will get sent to the database. If you put it on debug, everything debug information, warning, and error will be sent to the database. If you set it to information, the debug lines will never get sent to the database, but only the warning, error, the information, warning, and error. This is the level I usually, of course, the errors. And if you're really, if time is really of the most important, you'll probably want to set it to at least errors. You can turn it off, but I would at least want to see the errors as they occur. And in the current logger framework, there is one switch to rule them all. So if you set it to error, you get a couple of logger lines. Hopefully not too many. If you set it to warning, you'll get some more. And if you set it to information, you'll get the program flow. And if you set it to debug, you'll get all the information you might be interested in. Maybe not a good idea on a production system. So how do you do this? Well, what I usually do is I create a global constant, scope prefix, and use the lower user and the real SQL unit in there with the 2 dots in. And since the object names can be 128 characters since 12.2, I'm making this varchar to 258. And then in your procedure, all I have to do is the scope of my procedure for foo is the global constant, the prefix, and the foo there. So if my package name changes or if the owner changes, I don't have to do anything. If the procedure name changes, yes, then I have to change the procedure in this part as well. And then at the start of the procedure, I'm doing an information, getting the real SQL line where I'm at and start, and then logging all the text, do something important. And then I could, in the for loop, put a logger line for every loop, but that just generates too many rows for me. I would set a logger line just before the loop and a logging line at the end of the loop, so I know what has been happening. And if this change or this happens, if I becomes larger than 100, then I'll issue a warning. And in the warning, I'll get the SQL code and SQL error message, something what I want to say myself, further higher than expected, and I want to get the error backtrace. Chances are this is not going to happen. 10 times 10 is never going to be over 100. And then at the end of the program, I'm just logging in the information line end. And when something happens, then I will unlock an error. And I just noticed I forgot to read the error again. But I log the error. Where does it happen? Does it the real SQL line will be this line, SQL code and SQL error message. Something bad happened, and it gave me the format error backtrace. So I can always see what's been calling what and what's been going on. For functions, almost exactly the same, except that you want to enter your information for the end before you return. It's something, yeah, I walked into that and I was thinking, why doesn't my function ever end? And that was because the log information line was after the return, so it's never been called. Logging takes time. You're doing more work, so of course it takes extra time. And this piece of the test I've done, I've repeated the test 100 times and all the tests 20 times. These are the approximate numbers. You'll see that when no logging or at set the warning or error level, there is not too much of an impact. 1300 milliseconds to almost 1500, so it doesn't really matter. What really matters is when you just start using user-defined types, then your times really skyrocket. And if you're setting it to debug, yeah, of course, that takes a lot of time. Rob van den Berg says, I like Logger. How come it isn't shipped as DBMS Logger? Would that be a good idea? yes, that would be a good idea, but then it wouldn't be open source, and we wouldn't have, we wouldn't be able to change everything. So, hope that answers. On this slide, you see the user-defined types. They, if you use them in logging, they take up a lot of time. And why is that? Well, what I do if I have a user-defined types, in this case, for example, the departments with the employees. If you want to put it into the extras column, which is a CLOB, you just call XML type and then user-defined type get CLOB file. That really takes some time, but you'll get a nice XML representation of your user-defined type. And that really, in this case, maybe not, but it can really take some time to do this. Good. Time for a little sip of water. Any other questions so far? I'm just watching the.
I think you're very clear, Patrick, because there are no other questions.
Yeah, of course. Good. All these log lines is kind of a bit like, where's Waldo? You want to find the lines of interest. It is like a game of where is Waldo? I don't know about you guys, but and I've presented this on a really big screen in the cinema, but nobody could find Waldo. He is actually over here. Sorry. And if you don't believe me, he really is over here. So how do you find the lines of interest in your logger table, logger logs? If you just do a select star and order and do an order by, you get a lot of data. So first of all, probably what you want to do is limit the number of columns you're interested in. But that still gives you a lot of data. What you can then do is, well, I want to see just for a certain SID the lines. If you know the SID, I'm really not using that too much. What I do is I want to see for a certain log level or larger than log or smaller than a certain log level. Log level 16 is debug, 8 is information, 4 is warning, and 2 is error. So sometimes I'm just interested in the errors. You can also say, well, I know what kind of text there is, so I'm just interested in seeing something like that piece of text. Or I'm just interested in a certain part of my program, just a certain scope. Because remember, Logger has a single switch. It just has one switch to rule them all. And that's where the adaption comes in. What we did is we created a new log level with a switch per scope. You can still set your master level, for instance, to information. But for your current development, you'll probably want to see all the steps that it's been taken. All the debug lines have to be in there. But for something read settings, you just want to know when there's an error, because not even the information gives you any interest. Writing log information, like to a file or something, I only want to see warnings there. Not for the rest of it. I'm not interested in the information or debug level. We actually use this while developing, and then we put the log information to debug. And you can just, for every part of your program, you can set the switch differently. This doesn't have to be on the package level. It can be a procedure as long as you use your scope correctly. A bit of an explanation. I'm creating a package, normal behavior, just show errors, and this needs investigation. 3 procedures and a procedure to run them all. And the procedures are exactly the same. They have exactly the same contents. They start with an information line, they log a debug message, they log another information line, they log a warning message and an error message, and then another information line. And just to show errors. The only difference is the name of the procedure and the scope variable. And this needs investigation, same old, same old. If I run this in debug mode, so in the old way of working, and I select some lines, just everything for that day, I still get a lot of rows. In this case, 20 rows for those simple programs. Let's now set the level, the warning. So the overall level is being set to warning. The just show errors procedure is set to error, and the procedure this needs investigation gets set to debug. And if I then run them all, and I run the exact same query again, I'll see the lines for the normal behavior are just the information in error. And for just show errors, it shows me only the error. And for this needs information of investigation, it shows me all the lines. So the information and debug, information, warning, error, and information again. So that way, you'll limit the number of lines in your database, but also you limit the work that has been done. Because if you don't have to insert a line, you don't have to do the work. Any questions? Yellow in the chat? I'm just wondering.
No questions in the chat.
Okay, thanks.
Right. One question just appears.
Oh yeah.
Check.
Is the logging information also stored in a file? No, Michelle, the logging information is not stored in a file. We're working in a database. And if you're in a database, you use tables to store your data. Does that answer your question? Alert log? No. This is purely in the PL/SQL realm. Alert log is more for DBAs. And a normal PL/SQL developer doesn't have access to these logs, but we do have access to tables. Mike, is it also possible to set the logging level outside the session that will log? Actually, the logging level is being set in a table. I didn't mention that. It's a column in the table. The overall setting is just a single column. And if you want to use the log by scope, then you'll enter another record into a different table where you set the level of logging for that specific scope. But that's application wide. So if I set it, it's also available to you or working for you. Hope that answers the question. If not, come see me afterwards. No. Yeah. Program is running. Something goes wrong. So the nice user calls up the help desk. Hello, help desk. Something went wrong. Can you help me? Of course we can. First of all, thank you for calling. I'm always forgetting that. And then they ask you, could you please repeat the exact steps that led to the error? So we expect the user to memorize all the steps they took to perform to make sure the error happens again. Well, that's the only way I can turn on the debugging. Remember, we had the switch we could turn on, and then and then I can see what happens, what led to this error. And then I was talking to Conor McDonald on one of the conferences, and he says, yeah, there has to be a better way to do this. And we came up with a solution, and I implemented that. If you're running your code, why not save the log lines in memory? You can create an associative array of a maximum size. If you add another line, you'll remove some at the beginning. This way, there'll be, for instance, like 100 log lines available. And just keep that in memory. Keep the last 100 or 200 or whatever you choose, whatever you think is useful, lines in memory. And if something really goes wrong, if an error gets logged, we don't just log that error, we also dump out all the rows that are in the associative array, in the memory structure. So what then happens, something terribly wrong, can you please help me? And then of course you get a nice woman who says, yeah, sure, please hold, I'll check the logs. I'll probably have available. And the only thing is, people are a bit afraid of big brothers watching you. So you can see exactly what steps I took in the program. Well, yeah, but only the steps that led to this error. As soon as you start a new session, everything in memory gets deleted. So there's no problem. And what you do to find your lines of interest, what you're interested in. I've been working with Logger for the last couple of years. So I've created a script which has a couple of parameters. How many minutes do you want to check back? If you're not saying anything, it'll look back 45 days. But mostly you're interested in the log information of the last half hour or the last hour or whatever. What should the text be like? What should the text not be like? What should the scope be like? What should the scope not be like? What's your minimum log level? Maximum log level? And since I added the log to associative array, I needed to get the prefix and suffix just to get the extra information. And then I do a select, which looks pretty daunting, but well, you can download this script, I think, pretty soon. Do a select from my logger table, and then I'm just seeing the data that's interesting to me, giving the timestamp, the text, the scope, the logger level, etc., everything in one go. Gerrit Boersma, can the framework also set DBM, I think in DBMS application info to track program flow in $V session during running or of long running progress? No, it does not put anything in DBMS application info, but you can still use that. And if you want to trace your program, if you're using the information correctly, the information level, you can use that. You can use that to since it's an autonomous transaction, all the steps are available whilst the program is running. So you can probably do something with that. Yeah, there's one question in chat.
Yeah, so there's a comment from Eric in the chat. Maybe you want to react on that?
Yeah, let's see. Using associative arrays, small lose risk of losing local lines also happens to your session and power outage kills it. Yeah, you'll lose the logging that hasn't been inserted yet, but you'll probably, if you have a power outage, you'll probably don't see an error, and that's the only moment when the lines will get dumped to the database. Thanks, Eric. Thanks for nothing. I was hoping this was going to, yeah. Some resources. If you want to get the original logger framework, go to Aura open source, get the Aura open source category equals logger. And if you want to get my version, log by scope, and probably pretty soon log using associative array, go to my GitHub and get my version there. And yeah, as you probably know, Oracle is one of the best instrumented programs out there. If something goes wrong, Oracle asks you to set a certain trace level so they get the output, in this case mostly in files, and you can send that to support, and they'll probably know what has been going on. And that's a lot easier than flying all the Oracle people over the globe, especially now. And that's it. Any other questions?
Let's give it a minute of time.
While we're here, check out the free tier. Let's make sure Oracle has to upgrade all the machines for us. Thanks again. You're welcome, Rob. Go on.
Okay. Let me take the opportunity to announce next week's speaker, which is Jim Suprinsky, and his talk will be about fast and furious handling edge computing data with Oracle 19c, fast ingest, and fast lookup. So be there, I would say.